So, hello everyone. What a great evening to have a fantastic webinar about crypto today. I was really looking forward to this event. I mean, obviously, because we have such amazing speakers today and the lineup is pretty great, with speakers coming from Malta, where we are currently based, actually, from Germany, where we came from a few years ago, and from the United States. So we have high-class speakers for you guys today. Let me quickly give you an introduction about who I am. I'm Christoph. I'm working at Hands Up Media. I will be your host today at this crypto webinar sponsored by aPay about stablecoins. Let me give you a quick recap about this year, because it has obviously been also a very interesting year for us. We actually hosted the first crypto webinar sponsored by aPay at the beginning of the year, where all this Corona stuff was very unspectacular and far away from where it is today. We had a nice evening in a fantastic location and also heard back then fantastic presentations of nice speakers. So then every one of you knows what happened, the pandemic. There were lots of events that we planned and that we wanted to host, obviously, because crypto is just such an amazing topic. But yeah, like I assume in every country where all of you might live, the same situation, you cannot have public events in the size that we wanted to have it. So, but I'm much more prouder than I could ever be, because now we have a fantastic live webinar. So technology, like blockchain technology, is as well brought us to a situation where we can host such an event with attendees from everywhere in the world. So me and my team, we worked very hard. We reached out to the speakers that you will hear very soon to speak about stablecoins and whether or not stablecoins are maybe the future or just nonsense. Every speaker will give us his or her personal side on the topic. And you're very welcome to write your own messages, your own questions through the presentation, through the chat function. So feel free to send the messages, your questions, in the chat. After each presentation, we will have some time to speak about your questions and hopefully to answer all of them. So that brings me to our first guest today, and I'm very proud that we won Sven Wagenknecht from Germany to speak at our event. To give you a short introduction who Sven is, Sven is editor-in-chief at Bitcoin Echo, a huge German online magazine or not only German, but also Austria and Switzerland. I think it's actually the biggest and most influential crypto magazine in Germany and in the German-speaking area. And yes, and Sven will speak about like the dematerialization of money, for example. And yes, Sven has a very macroeconomic view on the topic and might give us some very nice insights on the topic. So I don't want to wait any longer. I now invite Sven to share his screen and to enable his camera and microphone and to hold his presentation. Ask your questions through the chat function and enjoy the presentation.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I hope you can see my screen on my presentation. And yeah, a warm welcome from Berlin, my home office. And today I would like to talk about the token economy and yeah, the question why and how it will change our lives. And yeah, if you thought I would talk about the increasing Bitcoin price of the last days, I must disappoint you. That's not on my agenda. But nevertheless, yeah, you can ask me later on it if you want. And yeah, instead, I would like to start with the term of value, more specifically about the digitization and embodiment of value in digital infrastructures. And the question is, yeah, what do I mean with value? And I mean things that are scarce or should be scarce in terms of availability. That could be, for example, rights of use, like the bus ticket. That could be your driver license, property like real estates or stocks or money, of course, or yeah, personal or sensitive data which not everyone should have unlimited access to. And yeah, therefore, I would like it to give a little example because it's a very abstract topic. And for this kind of transformation process we are in with the blockchain technology and the token economy, I think that it makes sense to look behind what we have observed with other technologies. And therefore, I would like to concentrate on the communication infrastructure. And yeah, you all know the classic landline telephone from home where you, just can have calls, nothing more, nothing less. Today, of course, we have our smartphones, but less and less we use our, let's say, classic telephone network. Like here right now, we are using the internet and software like Microsoft Teams, Skype, Google Hangouts, and so on and so on and so on. And this is so exciting because right now we have the opportunity that I can share my screen. I can hold a presentation, we can have a chat, we can exchange files and data. So we can do a lot of things, much more than just having a call. And this is an aspect that is very important for me because what we see right now is that the communication infrastructure is flexible, adaptable, programmable. And these features are coming now to not the information infrastructure, not the communication infrastructure, but we observe this with our value infrastructure. And this is like the next internet. It's like the internet of value because we don't have the information layer, we are at a value layer. And to do this and to have value transactions, therefore we need a blockchain, because with the internet we are not able to do this. With the internet we cannot guarantee that the values are not getting manipulated. We cannot guarantee that there is no double spending or manipulation. So we need a new infrastructure, a decentral one, where we have a new way to re-embody value, to digitally securitize value so that we can make transactions in this infrastructure without middlemen, and that's very important. And for this purely digital environment where we can have, or we can use a token as a placeholder on a blockchain, I would like to give another example from the past where we could observe some similarities to the new value infrastructure, to the token economy. And this is the music industry, or music itself. So we all know the classic vinyl music carrier, and we all know then we had these carriers were replaced by a more efficient store, so CDs. So music was more efficient stored, and it was very exciting when we saw the computers and the internet, because up from then we had no physical limitation. We could send and store and copy music without the limitation. And even today we don't have the music stored on our computers, it's in the cloud. Our music is completely dematerialized in the cloud, where we have Spotify or YouTube and so on and so on. And there's also the similarity, which is very important to understand token, because this way of dematerialize things, not like a certificate with a securitized security, but only in a digital way. This is something we can observe with token right now. And therefore I really like the legislation of Liechtenstein, because Liechtenstein, they got a blockchain act. And in this act, they describe token as digital container. And I really like the image of a container, because you can put all the things, all the products and goods into a container. And token are quite the same, fully digital, of course, but can you put everything you want into a token. It could be a corporate bond, for example. Then we have a security token. You can put the right to use a 3D printing file, for example, or, and I guess this is one of the most exciting things happening right now, you can tokenize money. You can tokenize the euro, like the European Central Bank is trying to do, or private initiatives like Facebook with Libra. So a lot of actors are trying to put our money on the blockchain, or like, let's say, a token ecosystem, because it's not always decentralized. That's very important when we talk about central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, for example. But it's one of the major topic and transformation process we are in. And very famous is China by trying to create a digital currency there, renminbi, and they are very successful. They are in the lead with the development of digital central bank currencies. They already had some pilots where they tested the digital currency, and some smaller states are at the front very as well, like Bahamas. In Bahamas, it's very small, but it's already live. So the people can pay with their Bahama dollars already on token basis. So this is a very fascinating movement from the state and from private actors like Facebook as well, of course. And yeah, maybe you ask, okay, why do they do this? I mean, from a state's perspective, there are different intentions to use to create a digital currency. Of course, they want to compete with private actors like Facebook, because it's a danger when now a private company or consortia have the control or the power of the money and not the state. So this is, of course, a big motivation for the states to create their own central bank-based digital money. And it's really great for the state, because the state wants to control all the transactions. The state wants to have programmable money. And this money, when it's programmable, gives the state much more opportunities to improve their power on the people. And this is, I think, a reason why especially states with let's say high power or high level of control, autocratic states, have an interest to implement digital central bank currencies. And another aspect of next to the political power is to enable the industry, because there are so many things today in the development we see in to corresponding technologies like artificial intelligence, like Internet of Things, like virtual reality. So there are a lot of buzzwords maybe, but it is the truth. So blockchain enables us to do transactions in this new technology infrastructures, because we need something that is able, that machines can do transactions, not only human, but also machine-to-machine communication, that cars, for example, autonomous cars, can do value transactions. If it's data or if it's money, it doesn't matter, but that the cars can do transactions via smart contracts. And therefore, the cars need token. And we already see it right now that, for example, Daimler, the car manufacturer, is trying to implement hardware wallets, so-called car wallets, into their cars. So there's an exciting project, for example, with Riddle and Code, a blockchain company from Austria, who is trying to put this hardware wallets into the cars. And there are also other blockchain corporations in the automotive sector, like that the Daimler Mobility platform is based on ontology, so the Chinese blockchain ecosystem. So there are a lot of efforts from the industry to implement blockchain for their future services. And we also see it, for example, with smartphone manufacturers, with Samsung. They are also trying to implement hardware wallets into their new mobile phones, so that we are all able to do token transactions with our smartphone. So finally, if we like it or not, token are the new standard. We need token for a decentralized smart economy where we have all these new technologies. We're in an communicating in an interconnected way and doing value transactions. That's very, very important. And from my side, I could only say, be open-minded to it. And if you don't have a wallet today, you will have a wallet in 2 or 3 years, because you need a wallet for the services. And be open-minded. It's very exciting. Don't be shy. Be one of the early adopters in this token economy, if it be central bank digital currencies or stable coins, of course, from the private sector, which are very important, I think, because we need an alternative to only the very centralized versions of state money. So stablecoins are playing a very big role in this transformation process. And yeah, be open-minded to it. And yeah, I hope I could inspire you a little bit. And if you have some questions, don't hesitate. Thank you very much.
Wow, Sven, thank you very much for your presentation. Very, very impressive and very lots of helpful information. What directly came into my mind was like when you mentioned, for example, the digital euro, or like in China, what they are planning over there. Do you think it's like the breakthrough that also helps other cryptocurrencies, or is it like the alternative that pushes away every other cryptocurrency? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think it's very important to concentrate if the use cases are centralized or decentralized. And what we see is the drive from the state to gain control, because Bitcoin, for example, or stablecoins like Tether, they're a big danger for the state. So it's like a try to regain control. And yeah, we will see what happens. I mean, legislation and regulatory aspects are very important. And I guess in the future, we will see some more rules and restrictions, like that you have more policies to your customer, for example, that it's not so decentralized like you maybe want that it's decentralized. So yeah, I don't know where it goes, but it will be very exciting. We will see.
Yeah. Thank you. Like, I just had a look on the questions. We got some questions here from Lorraine Dominguez. She asked, what's your opinion on what's the most trending coin currently? Maybe as editor-in-chief at Bitcoin Echo, you have some insights that you want to share?
No, I mean, I didn't give not investment advice. First of all, that's very important. And right now, I'm absolutely focused on Bitcoin, because what we see right now is incredible. I mean, not only the price increase of the last days, yeah, we saw 18,000 US dollar today, but I mean the integration in the financial sector. So there's PayPal. PayPal have about 346 million users. They integrated Bitcoin. There are many other big banks and companies like MicroStrategy who move their US dollar money into Bitcoin. So, of course, there are a lot of exciting coins, definitely. But right now, for me, Bitcoin is the most interesting one. I cannot tell you which, when we talk about smart contract blockchains, for example, is it Ethereum? Is it EOS? Is it, I don't know, Chainlink? They all have the pros and cons. I mean, we will see. It's not already finished. So the leader in this game of the cryptocurrencies based on the smart contract cryptocurrencies like Ethereum, I think that we will see a change in the next 2 or 3 years. That will happen a lot.
Yes, thank you. I mean, it's already always a hot topic to recommend any coins. I totally understand that you don't want to say something like that, but no worries. Let's go to the next questions. Elias asked, do you think politicians will change their mind about cryptocurrencies someday? Probably this question comes from a perspective where lots of politicians, for example, in Germany, are somehow like afraid, maybe because of a reason, but are very like don't want this topic to grow that much. That's at least I have a feeling.
Of course. I mean, what I observed is that you have both sides. There are some politicians who are very open-minded to it, who really likes the idea of cryptocurrencies and decentralization. And of course, there are a lot of politicians who have big fears that this is something they cannot control. And I think, and that's maybe a little bit a negative outlook, I think that the politicians are going more to the corner to say, let's don't make it too big, let's make some rules. I don't think that they will prohibit Bitcoin or something like that. That will not happen. But I'm a little bit critical because the state is not a big fan of really decentralized cryptocurrencies. So,
but it's like, are stablecoins, aren't they like a solution for that problem? Because it doesn't have the volatility, for example, that many politicians are afraid of. maybe for a reason. Aren't stablecoins then the go-to solution for those politicians?
It depends if the state can control the stablecoin. Like, for example, let's take Facebook's Libra project. So it's not allowed right now, but maybe in a few months or something like that, the state will say, okay, I allow you to have the stablecoin if I got control as a state. So it depends always on the project and on the access the state has. And will be a tough question in the future. But for example, the new senator from Wyoming, from the state, gave a little television interview about Bitcoin, and she's a big fan of Bitcoin. So there are also some politicians that are pro Bitcoin and pro decentralization, but I think that's a very early stage, and the most don't really know what's behind it. So that's always a problem, that the politicians have so many other issues, so many other topics, but blockchain is so complicated to understand the concept behind of it, that the politicians, most of them, I guess, don't really understand, and they just say, okay, it's against the state, it's for the dark net, it's maybe criminal related. So, and that's always a problem, and it's always, it's not easy. It's a very hard issue.
I mean, probably now the most recent rise of Bitcoin might push the one or the other politician to give at least another statement and think about this topic once more, which would be highly appreciated, I think, by many people. All right, let's go to the next question. Daniel asks, where do you see the most value currently, in DeFi or IoT projects? Very good questions.
I mean, DeFi is very hyped. I mean, what we see right now, from my point of view, has not much substance. The future, definitely DeFi has a future, a big future, but right now it lacks completely a real economy related substance. So there's a lot of speculation in the market. We see high yield farming projects where the people get high interest on the cryptocurrencies, and you always have to ask, where does the money come from? How do they, where's the productivity of this kind of ecosystems? And I can't see any productivity instead of speculation. So I'm really excited about the developments in the next 1, 2, 3 years, and we will see some really good use cases in DeFi, and crypto lending, for example, has a big future in my opinion. But it will take so much more time, and IoT is the same. IoT is something very different from it because it's a special industry use case. And as mentioned in my presentation, we need blockchain technology for a decentralized interconnectivity in the industry. So when our cars are autonomous in the future, that's IoT. And then we have a token infrastructure or need a token infrastructure, but same like we have in DeFi, it takes so much more time to have this. So it's hard to say it's DeFi or IoT. It's very different, maybe, and hard to compare.
I think this also answers Charles's question, who also asked about DeFi. So Sven, thank you very much. Very interesting presentation. Thanks for answering the questions of our viewers. And yes, thank you very much. Hope to see you soon again.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Wow, what a start into the evening. Sven, if you could exactly stop sharing your screen. Yes. So let me introduce the next speaker of the evening. I'm very fortunate to have a woman in the field of crypto, in the field of blockchain, so to say, because there are only few women that are out there. So we are much prouder than to have her today in our webinar. She's the founder of blockchainter.com. It's definitely worth a visit. You should visit the website, obviously, after the webinar and not now. And her name is Kata Stier, and Kata is from Malta, actually. So she's placed at the same island that we are. And Kata will have a very broad view on the topic of blockchain, not only crypto, but a more broader view. And I'm very happy to have her here today. And now I invite Kata to share her screen, and she already does, very good, to share her screen and start her presentation. Enjoy.
Hello, everyone. So you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, so hello and welcome to this webinar. It is my pleasure to be here today and express my thoughts about humanity's readiness for cryptocurrencies. It is a crucial topic in general, especially nowadays, in the middle of a crisis we live in. So as Christoph said, my name is Kata Stier. I'm a legal professional and have been working in the crypto space for the last 3 years. And I am the founder of blockchainter.com, where my mission is to educate people, but mostly women, about technology. Sorry, gentlemen, no offense here. Let me start this presentation with the definition of cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrency is a form of a digital asset based on a network that is distributed across a large number of computers. This decentralized structure allows them to exist outside the control of governments and central authorities. The name of cryptocurrency is a combination of cryptography and currency. With cryptography, advanced math is used to secure the funds and ensure that no one can access it. Cryptocurrency does not exist in a physical form, and one of the most essential features is that it is not issued by a central authority. So defining it a little bit more informal, I would say that a cryptocurrency is a digital form of cash. Making a transaction with it, you don't need a middleman to be asked to execute your order. Cryptocurrency was invented and designed to free people from the burden of banking systems and to create a new financial ecosystem. So the 3 key features of cryptocurrencies are, firstly, they are permissionless, which means that no one ever can stop you from using or interacting with a cryptocurrency as it is decentralized. Centralized payment services, however, can freeze your account and have control in general over your account. Secondly, it's censorship resistant. So hackers or other attackers can't shut down the system because of the way the network is designed. It's a cheap and fast payment method. So your money can be on the other side of the world within seconds at a fraction of the cost of an international wire transfer. Although cryptocurrencies have been around for more than 10 years now, the legal status still remains unclear and has different definitions in various jurisdictions. Are they money, an asset, property, or something else? So let's have a short introduction to the current regulatory landscape. Let's see the USA first. So laws governing the crypto industry vary from state to state, and federal authorities also interpret and regulate them differently. Cryptocurrencies are not prohibited in the US, but they are still not integrated into the country's financial structure. However, recent news from September that Kraken, the American-based cryptocurrency exchange operating since 2011, granted the first special purpose depository institution charter. It's like a banking license in Wyoming. Also, the country with the most Bitcoin ATMs is the USA, 5,748 machines nationwide. A survey carried out in 2020 by HSB reveals that 36% of small medium businesses in the US accepts Bitcoin. Just to mention a few of these companies are Microsoft, Wikipedia, Burger King, KFC, Subway. But on the other hand, news from the 1st of November, Facebook is censoring the Bitcoin hashtag in an effort to have a safe community, whatever this is. However, hashtags about drugs, weapons, and all the other altcoins are fine though. Let's see Russia and Eastern Europe. In Russia, where the population is rather crypto-friendly, the government still has not decided what Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies are, but appears to be most hostile toward technology. It has not issued a ban, however, at least not yet. Chainalysis, a blockchain analysis company, finds that Ukraine and Russia rank first and second, respectively, in the adoption of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. But while the vast majority of this activity is legitimate, Eastern Europe also leads the world in the illicit use of cryptocurrency on darknet marketplaces and in ransomware schemes. Chainalysis concludes that Eastern Europe accounts for more overall darknet market-related cryptocurrency activity than any other region. Eastern Europe also leads the world in ransomware payments. In ransomware schemes, hackers lock victims' files or computers and demand payment, usually in cryptocurrency, to unlock them. Chainalysis found that 23% of all funds sent from ransomware addresses were funneled to Eastern Europe, indicating that the region is the home of the world's highest earning ransomware operations. Now let's see the EU. So cryptocurrencies are legal throughout the European Union, but specific regulations and standards vary among countries. In January 2020, the 5th EU Anti-Money Laundering Directive took into effect, requiring the registration of cryptocurrency exchanges and wallet providers with financial regulators, and the transfer of client wallet addresses to them, which is the famous passporting rule, which is already applied in the banking sector. In general, the EU has been gradually tightening its regulation of the cryptocurrency market. The global economic instability caused by the coronavirus has affected the development of the crypto industry in Europe, accelerating the adoption of cryptocurrencies in some countries. In Asian countries, I guess no one doubts that digital payments are the future. The pandemic has once again proven the importance of digital payments, including cryptocurrencies. China, after being overly restrictive just a few years ago, now constantly generates news regarding the possible introduction of its own digital yuan. Japan, despite recognizing crypto as money, has made its laws quite strict, with the regulators tightening their policies further every now and then. Also recent news that Hong Kong aligns its crypto regulatory framework with the standards of the Financial Action Task Force, the FATF. Africa and India are becoming more prominent participants in the crypto market. Nigeria, for example, has recently issued regulations for digital currencies. Furthermore, new data from Chainalysis shows that many African people and businesses are increasingly turning to crypto over fiat as a means of exchange. In India, cryptocurrencies had been banned for a long time. The Indian Central Bank only lifted the restriction in May 2020. There is, of course, a great amount of potential in a country with a population of over 1.3 billion people. At this point, we have to wait and see how the events will unfold. But for both India and Africa, it is reasonable that cryptocurrencies hold many opportunities for people, since a large proportion of the population is unbanked. So after a few years of overhyped crypto market insanity, countless fraudulent projects, and questionable development factors, it became evident global acceptance of cryptocurrencies could not be achieved yet. Reality had proved that unbacked digital currencies couldn't lead to mass adoption. So this is how a new cryptocurrency asset class has been born, the stablecoin. Today's stablecoin solutions seeks to combine the benefits of blockchain technology with the stability associated with certain fiat currencies. Stablecoins are crypto assets that maintain a stable value against a target price. The most common peg observed today is the US dollar, which is generally accepted as the global reserve currency. There are a number of different stablecoin projects, but generally the peg is maintained in one of three ways. The first one is when coins in circulation are backed in a 1-to-1 ratio. This is the optimal case by fiat currencies. The second one is when coins in circulation are backed by crypto assets. But due to the speculative nature of crypto assets, crypto collateralized protocols usually require over-collateralization. And the third case is when coins in circulation are not backed. Instead, a smart contract is used to implement algorithmic stabilization, effectively acting as a central bank to increase or decrease the supply of coins accordingly in order to maintain the peg. So stablecoins enable global financial system to be interoperable because they bridge the fiat digital world. It's the way blockchain brings together our digital and physical lives, basically. So what are the qualities of an ideal stablecoin? The perfect financial instrument should possess several qualities, like be a convenient payment instrument, serve as a value measure, can accumulate value, withstand significant market volatility, maintain low support costs, provide decent scalability, support privacy and decentralization, be flexible enough to adapt to changing global and local regulations, and provide transparency for trading and arbitrage transactions. Such features can ensure the maximum acceptance of stablecoins in the modern world full of regulations and governmental pressure. It seems like that stablecoins represent the next evolutionary step for the finance industry at large. For example, suppose a user based in France wants to send money to a friend in Nigeria. In that case, they can convert traditional euros from their bank account to a euro-backed stablecoin that can easily and quickly be exchanged to a naira-backed stablecoin through a blockchain wallet. No long wait times or hefty fees from the bank. And from there, the user in Nigeria has the flexibility to keep, save, or spend their naira stablecoins, or to send them to their bank account, converting them to traditional naira. It is just as easy as sending an email. During the coronavirus outbreak, interest in digital currencies has accelerated the whole industry's progress, as the demand for a digital dollar and a digital euro has risen dramatically. It has also caused a drastic increase in the use of financial technology applications in Europe and the whole world, as more and more workers need to perform online. Digital money is safe to use to provide remote payments, and stablecoins could be the best tools for this. The latest Bain analysis shows that by 2025, an estimated 67% of transactions will be done digitally. That's a 10% increase from pre-COVID estimates. Chainalysis recently created the Global Crypto Adoption Index. Their goal was to quantify the differences in adoption between countries across the globe. Without going into more details of how they had been used, let's just see the top 10 countries and the key takeaways from the top 10. So the top 10 countries are Ukraine, Russia, Venezuela, China, Kenya, USA, South Africa, Nigeria, Colombia, and Vietnam. So as it can be seen, cryptocurrency is truly global. Of the 154 countries they analyzed, only 12 had so little cryptocurrency activity that they gave them an index score of 0. That's a testament both to the excitement around cryptocurrency as an investment, and especially in the developing world as a means of value storage and medium of exchange. Developing countries have high grassroots cryptocurrency activity. Venezuela represents a great example of what drives cryptocurrency adoption in developing countries and how citizens use it to mitigate economic instability. This pattern can be seen in other Latin American countries, as well as Africa, East Asia, and elsewhere. In many developing countries, people use cryptocurrency to carry out commercial transactions. P2P platforms are essential to adoption in developing countries. They don't custody any of the cryptocurrency or fiat traded on their platforms, meaning they don't have to connect to the banking system and face fewer regulatory hurdles. This allows them to onboard residents of developing countries more easily, many of whom are excluded from the traditional financial ecosystem. So I think the future is quite bright, but there is still a lot to do. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kat, for the presentation. Highly appreciated. Wow, you covered many topics, especially when it comes to topics like mass adoption of cryptocurrencies and, for example, hurdles for the mass adoption of cryptocurrencies. And you stated at one point that like centralized solutions are bringing many risks, for example. But now you also said like decentralized solutions aren't that far already, so it's not yet usable. Aren't then like solutions like, for example, aPay, which tries to actually building the bridge between those two technologies, centralized and decentralized, aren't those solutions like the go-to thing at this point?
Actually, my opinion on this is we are in this transitionary period. These are really indeed evolutionary steps. Like, although we believe the blockchain technology and everything is decentralized and transparent, but people need guarantee. Mm-hmm. So first of all, I think education is very, very important here, because people have to know exactly what is the technology about. And this is a very, very difficult task, because the technology itself, it's very complicated to explain and to understand. So regulator has a huge task to solve, I guess. And as also Sven discussed with you earlier, regulators are not a huge fan of transparency and decentralization. So I am also looking forward to it and being curious how they will solve this problem.
Yes,
I'm not jealous, to be honest.
Actually, like in Malta is one of the few countries who actually like implemented a license systems for like enterprises, like they try to obtain a crypto license. It's called the VFA Act. Like from my perspective, these licensed and this regulated environment makes sure that like enterprises such as aPay, that they cannot like, even though it's kind of centralized, they cannot harm, for example, the user's assets. So it's very secure because like the opinion on cryptocurrencies have been quite strict, and like everywhere in the world, the regulators are very concerned or have been very concerned. So Malta took like a big risk to step out and to invent such a regulation. Is the regulator the crucial part of mass adoption, or is it like companies that are just like missing in just not pushing the topic forward? Who's the one on that has to act now?
Actually, this is a very good question. It's very similar to what was first, the chicken or the egg. Because without regulation, how can you build the trust amongst people to their using these kind of new technologies? But on the other hand, as I am also coming from the crypto payment system, so I have experience with the licensing requirements, and I am a VFA agent myself. So this is overly regulated. I think a mistake was made, and not from a perspective of having this holistic approach. But and don't misunderstand me, I don't want to judge the Maltese legal system at this stage. but I think it wasn't really attractive for companies who are truly evangelists of the technology, because it just puts such a huge financial burden for a startup to have the license, to go for it, to go through the whole process, that it's impossible. So I think they got lost in this labyrinth. I mean, the regulator. And if I am not mistaken, still by today, not one license was obtained by any of the companies, and it's been already a year now. So yeah, I think time is the proof.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, like at one point in time in history, there's always that one country that steps forward and starts to regulate something, like blockchain and Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general came for many, many people in the world out of nowhere in 2017. So, and when we think it's only 3 years since then, which is a very short time period for a regulator and for a government to actually regulate something. So probably
yes, but, yeah, sorry for interrupting. Just one note that in the other hand, have a look at Gibraltar. They also have the regulation, and they also giving licenses. So the system is somehow working. So
let's see what the future brings at this point. Let's switch to questions that our viewers ask. Ivo asked, hello Kata, what do you think about Bitcoin ATMs? A very general questions.
To be honest, myself, I never use them. And I'm not a huge fan of Bitcoin ATMs, but if we are talking about education and make it closer to the mass of people, then from this perspective, I think it's a good beginning. But as you know, here in Malta, we had, I guess, one ATM, or maybe two.
Actually two, yeah.
Actually two, yes. But unfortunately, I didn't have the chance to test it myself.
Yeah, the funny thing is, like, one of the founders of the company that had Bitcoin ATM here in Malta was speaker at our last webinar, if I'm not wrong. Not webinar, but meetup, if I'm not wrong. And so it was quite interesting. Yes, so, and Arthur, maybe last question, also a Bitcoin related question. Do you think from your personal perspective that the Bitcoin price that is already very high currently will go even further?
My personal opinion, obviously not a financial advice, because as we say in the crypto industry, do your own research. But my opinion is yes. Now I think Bitcoin is unstoppable. After the halving, everything goes as it was predicted. So yes, fingers crossed.
All right, Kata, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very
much. Appreciate it. And yes, now you can also enjoy our last presentation of the evening.
Thanks a lot.
So, yes, that brings me to our last speaker of the evening. The name of the speaker is Chris Kamir. Chris is actually from the United States, and Chris is managing partner at Sustaini Capital. So he is like looking on the topic of blockchain and also probably cryptocurrencies from a little bit different perspective at this point. Chris has published many articles in famous magazines, online magazines, for example, like Black Moon or Forbes. So after the webinar, you might reach out to Google to check out his website and to read some of his articles. And yes, Chris will talk about blockchains and the state of money, which is also a very nice topic. And I'm very curious about what Chris has to say. And welcome, Chris. Very looking forward to your presentation.
Welcome, everybody. So first, the obvious, yes, I was born in Germany. I was a software developer for a short period of time in the 80s, but then went to law school in Münster, got a law degree. and joined one of the first internet service providers, which we thankfully sold at the height of the .com. So I promptly retired from the law and moved to California 20 years ago. And we first formed a fund that was focused on voice over IP solutions and multi-massive online player games. And this has a lot to do with the topic that we are focused on today, which is the blockchain space, or how we refer to it internally is decentralized software solution, which is a more accurate term for this technology. Let me start with some basics. So we're using the scientific method to investing, which usually starts with simply observing the current state of, in our case, technology. And unfortunately, if you went to any type of business school, you probably got inundated with this particular definition of money, which is a medium of exchange, a store of value, and a unit of account. That's a definition that was published in a textbook published by William Jevons in 1875. And unfortunately, I have to talk a lot about this because that's the root of a lot of misconceptions in that space. This is a phone of 1875 or 1876 to be correct. So needless to say, our phones don't look this way anymore, neither does our money look this way. Typically, when people talk about the history of money, they go back to about 9,000 years to barter exchanges, and that's also what Jevons did in his description. Actually, I'm going to skip through this really quickly because the interesting part is really the invention of ledgers, because that's what we're talking about. And ledgers existed for much longer than that, because if you were a Neanderthal, if you were walking through the prairie, and you were exchanging something, you didn't write this down on a piece of paper. You just remembered that someone gave you something and the social contract demanded that you return something back at a later point in time. So for 98% of our human history, we have worked with ledgers. So what are the stages of money? We look at this in 4 phases. So you start with a creation, you store money, you move money, and eventually might also be removing money. Money creation today is done in 2 ways. The first one that most people will be familiar with and hone in on is the money creation by central banks. So they create our physical cash and they create electronic central bank deposits. So CBDC, the discussion around that would be a third type of money that this institute is going to create. What are the objectives of this? It's financial inclusion, it's improved cross-border payments, it's privacy, it's competitiveness, and there are a couple of subsets of that. It's programmability, micropayments, M2M payments, cost effectiveness. Previous speaker have touched on that. We'll go back to this a little bit, but not all that much. So what is money today? Money is legal tender, means it's accepted for all debts, public charges, taxes, and dues. A common misconception is that a private merchant has to accept it, which they don't. If we decide between the two of us that Pokemons are money, then Pokemons are money. But also, physical cash is actually not owned by you. What do I mean by that? There's a distinction between what you can own and what you can possess in the legal concept. You cannot actually destroy physical cash. You can go to prison for doing this, at least in the United States. The reason why I'm mentioning this, because this might change in terms of creation of digital assets. So this is your cash today. This is what it costs. But what is more interesting is to know what cash is in the past and how it's been moved at. So there's a famous law that's being assigned to Gresham, which is kind of funny because this law has been around since Aristotle, which is that circulating currency consists of both good and bad money, and legal tender are forms required to be accepted at equal value, like I mentioned earlier, albeit not for private commerce. And circulation quickly becomes dominated by bad money. The reason being is if money is worth more, then the good money you will just store under your mattress, you keep it and give someone else the bad money. Throughout the United States, we obviously have a lot of cash. However, what's actually interesting is that the majority of physical cash that the United States produces circulates outside the United States, which is about 52% right now. The reason for this being is when country's currency fails, people will usually turn to the secondary value that they understand, meaning in this particular case is the physical cash of the United Dollar. So now we have more than a dozen countries where the country basically capitulated and took on the dollar as a primary exchange mechanism. The primary creation of money, however, is by commercial banks in the form of lending. So mostly for mortgages, then for corporate loans, for auto loans, student loans, and for HELOC. This is 80 to 90% of base money supply. At this point in time, I usually talk about inflation and the confusion around inflation. We can talk about it offline later because we won't have the time here. So it's very important to understand the difference from a technology perspective. We are technology investors between credit and loan. Credit is something that's a facility of the human. In the United States, it's typically expressed as a credit score. A loan is something that the bank extends to you. Even though semantically the bank will tell you they're giving you credit, what they're giving to you is a loan. Credit is something that you have. Money movement, and these are the examples of the United States. These are the transaction counts. So most transactions are done in the United States using credit cards and debit cards. Cash is still a huge component of transactions, albeit the next slide shows you the actual amounts. It is an insignificant amount of cash that's being transacted. Most cash transactions are very, very small amount. The $5 bill is the most exchanged cash transaction. How do we store money today? Money today is stored in databases. These databases are maintained typically by banks, by commercial banks specifically. So if Tom here has a bank account at Bank of No Return and wants to send Lisa money to her bank at Chase Me If You Can, then Tom will instruct his bank to send Lisa the amount, and then overnight the bank will reconcile with the Federal Reserve System, and if Lisa is lucky, then tomorrow she has her money. All money today that's not physical cash is stored in this particular way in a constant lending situation. So typically when you access money for payments, you're referring to it as M1. So that's your demand account, that's your checking account, and your Giro account if you're German. The medium of exchange, which should be pretty obvious right now, today is bytes. 97% of all money in the world only exists as byte. There's a small byte left, which is physical cash, but this is the default medium of exchange and has been for decades. So speaking a little bit of Bitcoin, and unfortunately, people always abbreviate this to money. It's not money. Bitcoin was meant to create a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. It failed for multiple reasons in doing this, and we still don't have peer-to-peer cash, unfortunately. The main reason is the obvious one: it has limited supply, so hence people start storing as a form of value. The main reason, however, that Bitcoin never created a minting function. I'll talk about this later. Coins and tokens. I've been talking about this topic for a very, very long time, and I'm just mentioning a few. Internally, I call stablecoins intellectual time travel to the times back of Jevons that I mentioned earlier, because commodity money specifically was never a relevant medium of exchange for large-scale economies at any given point in time. So moving on to what is the actual change? So we came from physical bearer instruments. They have great facilities. I gave it to you, I don't have it anymore, you have it, there were no transaction costs involved, you didn't see my passport. Makes for a good medium of exchange and a unit of account of sorts. However, most accounts, as I mentioned, are maintained in databases. So the third part that we are hoping to create eventually here is digital bearer instruments, which hopefully at that point in time combine the facilities of physical bearer instruments and that of account-based money. What are the functions of money? So I mentioned earlier that Jevons claimed that the functions of money are medium of exchange, store of value, and unit of account. That is wrong. If you look at any wallet right now, if you have a digital wallet and you store cryptocurrencies of sorts, you will always see what? You still the unit of account that is your language of value. If you're in the United States, you'll see the dollar. If you're in Europe, you see the euro. If in Japan, that you'll see the yen. The remaining function of money is simply that of unit of account or the language of value. The dominating language of value is the US dollar by far. 64% of world reserves are US dollar. Most trades internationally are done in US dollar. Money is a network technology. The US dollar dominates this network. To exemplify this with money buckets here in the United States, we have about $1.8 trillion in cash. Most of that is overseas. We got almost $4 trillion in checking accounts now due to the recent increase. We have corporate debt, we have mortgages, and we got certificate of deposit money market accounts, which is just overtook mortgages a few months ago. Then we got student loans, we got auto loans, HELOC. All of these classes together make up broad money. Typically, when people refer to inflation, they refer to overall money supply in this way. However, primary inflation first incurs in these particular asset classes. Then this is the current state of cryptos, approximately the size of HELOC, and then we got Bitcoin, which is half of crypto, as you guys will know. Credit cards I have separately because it doesn't add to money supply, but it's still obviously very significant. Summary and takeaways, because I want to leave a lot of time for FAQs, as money is a network technology. The function of money is that of language of value. Money does not store value, it only represents it. And the default medium of exchange are bytes, have been bytes. It doesn't matter if it's Bitcoin, if it's dollar, if it's yen. The medium of exchange is always the same, it's byte. The primary use case for money is lending. Its secondary use case is spending. And digital cash, we hope, will democratize the later, and that's what you're seeing very nascently in the DeFi space at the moment. As the moderator mentioned, we published some of these thoughts on a couple of magazines on a bi-monthly basis. So if you want to dive into these, I think we're going to publish those links later, but it's easy to find if you simply search for my last name. It's K-A-M-E-I-R, and I'll let you guys ask questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you for your presentation. Very interesting. Your thoughts on the topic. Like what came into my mind was like we have evolution everywhere. Like, for example, some years ago, people went on horses from A to B. Later on, there were uncomfortable cars. And now so on. And today we're sitting in electric vehicles that are very comfortable and like almost driving on their own. And like you mentioned that today already money is often seen in bytes, and for example, bank transfers are sent overnight through servers of different banks. Isn't it the logical evolution of financial system to also replace the current bytes and bits environment by a more secure technology like blockchain is?
Yes, so this speaks to our macro thesis on the space. So if you take the 10,000-foot view, like how we facilitated commercial activity. So you go back before the times of paper, we were like making carves and sticks, we were marking up stones, and then eventually we invented paper, and a lot of commercial activity was documented on paper documents, right? If you up until 1960, that was the case. You had file folders, you had cabinets, and that's where your documentation for your business took place. If I gave you a loan document, you would physically take this to your home. And these things have a lot of great properties. Also, they transfer to something that has to do with digital ownership that I would like to talk a little bit about as well. But then in 1960, we introduced databases. So databases are great in terms of comparison to paper. However, they also introduce a lot of insecurities, right? So databases allow you to copy data, you can damage the data, you can lose it, and so forth. But the biggest issue was introduced when we connected these databases to networks. Initially, those were private networks, and then we connected it at large to the internet. So at this point in time, anything that is in the database, you can assume is available on the quote-unquote black market. So the larger point here being, though, is that blockchain-based solutions, or probably more likely decentralized software solutions such as graphs, not blockchains, will replace databases. You cannot secure databases. It's impossible. So all database solutions, anything that's an asset, anything that's PID, needs to be a cryptographic primitive under the actual owner's control, and will be. We already see that.
Mm-hmm. So, but then, like again, the next step, when we see like the evolution of like the what you stated, insecure and database environment that we currently have, like most probably in every bank in the world. Yes.
What is your question?
Like when that happen, is it blockchain?
Probably
or graph, like you mentioned.
No, it's probably graphs, right? Because blockchains, unfortunately, people oftentimes refer to them as protocols. They're not protocols, they're applications making use of protocols, right? I mean, they're still using all the relevant protocols of the World Wide Web. At least that's my interpretation. Again, it's strong opinions weakly held. But the larger point there is, you really should recreate the facilities that are great about physical bearer instrument, right? So that holds true for cash. Cash is great because I can take it home. If you want to take it from me, you have to break first into my home, then find the cash and take it from me. And typically, I don't keep millions of dollars in my house, right? But the larger point there is that of actual identification documents. So think about your passport. If I want to steal your passport, I still have to find your house. I have to break into it, and I have to find where you store it, take it from you, and then use it in a malicious way. That is not true for other KYC information, right? They are just digitally stored. We need to create the same facilities, but you need to create the facilities as cryptographic primitives that are completely under owner control. So you only provide access in, let's call it a streaming fashion, if and when someone needs to have authentication, verification, certification as a 9-layer process in order to either do a transaction or see your credentials to do something specific. Typically in the future, we will just pass on, let's call it a green check mark for you are okay to enter this facility and or you are okay to pass this border, because obviously a border agent or the banker doesn't care about your first or last name, right? What he cares about is stored someplace else. He cares about the fact that you are not allowed to pass the border. He cares about the fact that you're not allowed to have a bank account, quote unquote, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe as an addition to something that someone said earlier, there's a lot of talk and unfortunately a lot of confused talk around this topic of regulation. And typically I start my talks with saying reality doesn't have lobbyists, and unfortunately it also doesn't have an advertising budget, right? So we do due diligence on hundreds of projects in the space, and what we see consistently is legal professionals interfering with product design. And so in our case specifically, what I mean by that is, if you implement the technology as intended, you do not have legal exposure. What I mean by that. So if you again look at the title of the Bitcoin white paper, if you facilitate a peer-to-peer transaction, if there's no intermediary taking custody either of assets or of PIDs, there is no surface structure for a regulator to come in, because you have to understand what these laws and regulations are intending to do. They're intending to protect the consumer, and they're intending to protect them from custodians mostly, right? I mean, there's obviously a lot of nuances and there's different laws and regulations around the world, but you can take this as a rule of thumb. So if and when you implement the technology as intended, I don't know if you're sending me as the individual or the company providing the technology solution, I don't know if you're sending me Bitcoins or Pokemons. I don't know your name and I don't have to, right? That's kind of the point. So that's actually the exception. So unfortunately, all the legacy regulations apply specifically to those legacy entity and by extension to the legacy technology, because databases didn't provide this facility. That's why I had this, I call it the dragnet approach to regulation, to where we make the assumption that any transaction is illicit, and so we need to monitor it, and we need to ask you about your passport when you open up an account, when you do a transfer over a certain amount. Right, so that's actually not the case, right? If you look at your past transaction, there was nothing illicit about it, I assume, right? There was no need for that to be monitored, and that's the default case. So if and when you actually wanted to impede illicit activity, what you should be doing is take $100 notes out of circulation, because that's the means, right? But again, it's hypocritical to do it any other ways. And actually, my partner coined a really great phrase, like regulation will not disrupt blockchain. Blockchain will disrupt regulation.
That's a nice quote, yeah. Let's head over to some questions the people out there asked. So David asked, hey Chris, great to have you here in this webinar. His question is, are cryptocurrencies the evolution of fiat money? I mean, you touched that slightly, probably you can tell.
Yeah, I mean, look, we have more than 7,000 experiments, right? And so there's an overwhelming amount of evidence that whenever you conflate the functions of these instruments, and that was what I was referring to earlier. So if you add a secondary function, typically that of speculation on a centralized exchange, what do you get? You totally destroy its primary function. Let's use Ether as the primary example, right? Its main function is that of DDoS protection of the Ethereum computer, right? And obviously, as soon as the price shoots up and the transaction cost me $18, well, I can't do that transaction anymore, right? So that is a side effect of the conflation of functions. And you see this over and over again. And the current state of, like, quote unquote cryptocurrencies, by the way, a terrible, terrible term, right? It's utterly useless to call these things cryptocurrencies, and it needs to be way more nuanced. But it got a lot of unwanted attention to the space, because if I tell a regulator, well, I'm going to send you a private key and it lets you manipulate this entry on this public blockchain thing, then he or she wouldn't think to regulate it, I assume, because that would be just too confusing. And that's really what's happening, right? And the other confusion here is obviously you don't have coins in your wallets, right? They don't exist. There's no such thing. These are all very useless metaphors, and I heard a lot of them earlier again, and they get us always in trouble. Again, it's very important to understand what the technology actually does. So back to the original question of cryptocurrencies. I have kind of flippantly said this for some time. The number of cryptocurrencies we likely need is somewhere between 0 and 1. I love Bitcoin and everything it stands for. Don't get me wrong. I think Bitcoin is money of last resort. It's an expression of free speech. It should be protected in the same way, in my opinion. But as a technology, obviously, it can't serve this particular purpose. And as long as you conflate the functions, it won't. Because again, the remaining function of money is simply that of unit of account. Don't try to change that. The worst thing for the adoption of technology, that's why this battle cry that we are still getting after 10 years in the space every single day is cryptocurrency adoption, Bitcoin adoption. That is utter nonsense. The point there being is no one adopted voice over IP. What I mean by that, it's like if you ask your mom if she's using voice over IP, she says, I have no idea what that is. And then you ask mom, are you using WhatsApp? Are you using Skype? Are you using any other thing? And she'll say, yeah, sure. And you'll say, mom, you're using voice over IP. And mom's like, yeah, I don't care. It's like, it just works, right? It just so. And the other confusion here is, and that pertains particularly to stablecoin. If you read the original white paper specifically about the leading stablecoin Tether, it was the idea that we need to mitigate the volatility of other cryptocurrencies, specifically Bitcoin, so that these instruments can function as payments. Payments is not a problem. Payments are solved. I have many, many, many ways of paying you, right? And so also you can see what happened with Tether. What's the main function of Tether? It's to stay on your on your centralized exchange to speculate against BTC. So that's why Tether has the velocity it has. I mean, Tether at any given point in time has 4.5 or something a velocity in a 24-hour period. That's the velocity of the US dollar in a quarter. So it works very well for this particular use case. That's it, right? You won't see a Bitcoin price on a banana anytime soon or ever, right? So no one needs it for payment. And once we have CBDCs, obviously, you won't need any quote-unquote stablecoins. I mean, we can talk about stablecoins for a very long time, but I think, to me, as I said flippantly, I call them intellectual time travel to the thinking of commodity money. And commodity money has never been a relevant use case for large societies in any shape or form, right? Even like, if you just use the last 10,000 years, even within that spectrum, we hardly ever had commodity money, because up until a few hundred years, most people were subsistence farmers, right? They were toiling in the fields. They wouldn't have the means or the use for a gold coin or a silver coin, right? They still had ledger entries. That's the main point, right? So for the existence of humans, we have had ledgers. The initial ledger was wetware, was a human brain. And it is still today. Right? These are the social contracts, and so anytime we just formalize it or standardize it, we express it in something that's recorded in a ledger and has a certain unit of account. But it makes no difference to the byte if you put a dollar sign, a yen sign, or a Bitcoin sign in front of it. It's still the same byte. It doesn't change the byte. What changes, that's the important thing to understand, it's the tethering, if you want to use the same term. So the fact that these bytes, for the most part right now, are locked in databases under control by legacy companies, right? And the more important part there to understand is, and I want to get across, is commercial banks get to create most of the money that they're lending. So they have an unfair advantage, right? If I can't create the money that I lend out, I do this all day long, specifically if it's over collateralized with a house where I only lend you 80% of the value of the house. So it's a non-event on the balance sheet. But yeah, so the main job right now for technologists in the space is to create equilibrium between those bytes. What do I mean by that? So as I mentioned earlier, every byte in a database is in a constant lending scenario. Whatever's in your checking account, most of that, pretty much all of it, is being lent out. You don't get to make interest on that. The bank does. The bank gets to make interest on CDs and pays you a little bit of that. So the advantage here is to remove M1, remove demand accounts from the hold that the commercial banks have on it, because that's the bad money today, because it's inflationary. And it's not the inflation that's been propagated, obviously. Again, to understand inflation, you have to look at the primary inflation, which is what the money is being created for. So money overall, in terms of overall supply, has been mostly created for houses, and unfortunately, mostly for houses that do exist. This is unproductive lending, right? It's the same house, higher price. Same value, higher price. That's the definition of inflation. So your job right now is, if you're working on a wallet, which is the most interesting part, is to remove that inflation from that equation. Because if you can lend it out and you only shave off something from your M2 money, let's call it that for the time being, if and when some schmuck on the other end still wants it for payment, then you don't have to move into bad money only for this particular split second, because in principle, bytes move at the speed of light, and they don't because they're sitting in databases under commercial bank control for the most part. So that's the primary objective right now. That was the primary objective of the Bitcoin white paper, right?
Yes, I mean, when it comes to the usage of stablecoins, obviously there are many people that take use of Tether for the exact use case that you, for example, just described. And I think T, who has another great question, is heading in the same direction. He's asking, do you have any thoughts on the global reset at all? And is there a possibility that the US dollar will lose its value so substantially that something like gold or Bitcoin will become the new backed currency?
No. The dollar, again, I mean, money is first and foremost a network technology. A simple way to explain it, if you, Christoph, had all the money in the world, how much value would you have? You would have no value whatsoever because no one else had it, no one else would want it at that point in time, right? So it's about network effects. The US dollar has the largest network effect by far. The second largest is the euro, and it's outclassed by 1, 2, 3. Right? So you can pay with the US dollar in many countries right now. They will gladly accept it in printed form. Try this with any other currency. Maybe the euro, but probably not any other one, right? So it's about network effects. And again, the primary function is simply that of unit of account. And you can try this right now, right? I mean, pull up your digital wallet. You can just change your unit of account, right? That obviously doesn't change your Bitcoin in any shape or form. It just makes it understandable for you. And that will be true for many other things. So the way there will be an equilibrium, though, hopefully, is if we have CBDCs that are compatible with each other, because it will avert people from inflating their own currency too much. Because, again, if in other countries hyperinflation set in, the citizens of these countries typically turned to their secondary language of value, which in the past, you can look back 100 years, was the US dollar in its physical form. This is the most successful export product of the United States still today. Because, I mean, legally, technically, it is an obligation, right? It's being lent out, but it's being lent out for no interest, and no one ever comes to turn it back, right? No one ever shows up at the Federal Reserve saying, "Here's your $100 note back," or something else, right? I want treasury notes, right? But so the larger point there is, so the likelihood that the US dollar will fail or go into hyperinflation is less than 1%, right? It could happen, but again, most of physical money is not even within the United States. Right?
All right. Let's maybe one last question of Daniel. Hi, Chris. I personally think Bitcoin will never replace our fiat money. It will replace gold as a standard. But how do you see the future of money? Will it be the central banks creating their own national cryptocurrencies? Or will we see a global currency based on an existing coin?
Yeah, so I have kind of flippantly said a few times, someone will create an actual digital bearer instrument by accident that is US dollar dominated. So I spend a lot of time talking to the teams that work on CBDCs. We have a very extensive framework for the viability of these solutions because we are investing in the space. So stablecoins are very similar, obviously, to CBDCs. You could call CBDC stablecoins if you want to. Again, I think it's somewhat of a stable and nonsense term because obviously, if you peg your digital asset to something that itself is inflationary, how is that stable? It's like anyway. But so the larger point there is there's in all of these papers you see these demands that I put out earlier, like financial inclusion and efficiency of cross-border payments, which is the mandate of the G20. So we will see those. The question is if these will be actual digital bearer instruments that have all the facilities of physical cash. So, and that obviously mostly refers to the anonymity and controllability. Will the agencies that are in charge of AML and KYC right now let go of that? I think that the chances of that happening in the developed nations is zero. But what could happen is that if I have a peg to the US dollar, if I'm a small nation, I already pegged my currency to the US dollar, which is, I think, 12, 14 nations around the world right now. And I, again, inadvertently create something that's digital cash, that has all the same facilities that you and I can trade anonymously, that settles instantly, that doesn't require in the onboarding phase for me to do KYC and wipe away its herd immunity. That's why I call it. At that point in time, there is a reasonable chance that this particular instrument will just achieve the highest velocity because it has the lowest friction. Because in technology, it's all about, that's what I mentioned earlier, it's all about removing the friction. So what are the current frictions of digital money, right? Because money, as I said, has been digital for a long time, but What is the friction? The friction is it's tied to a database, and that database is maintained by a private company, a commercial bank, and that commercial bank then is overseen by a regulatory agency. So they all introduce their own frictions. All of a sudden, money disappears for 24 hours and shows up the next day, or my transaction doesn't go through because something is wrong on the other end with the sender having a similar name to someone who shouldn't get money, and so forth. So there's a million things that can go wrong all the time. So if you remove that friction and you have a currency with the highest velocity and lowest friction that is US dollar denominated, at that point in time, there's a reasonable chance that this will take over the network. It should, right? It has the highest velocity, and at that point in time, I got 1.7 billion client instantly, and probably many more. And so, yeah, that would be, and again, that's an outsized chance, obviously, but that would be the one scenario where I can see that a digital currency won't be US dollar denominated and dominated at the end of the day.
All right. Thank you very much, Chris. It was very interesting. And thank you very much for your presentation. Now, let me give all of you some last words for this evening, and then I will close this webinar. Thank you very much for joining us. You will all receive an email, and we will share, obviously, the links to the websites of our speakers today. Yes, thanks for joining. Stay safe. Have a nice evening, everyone, and see you next time by our webinar sponsored by aPay. It will be not very soon, probably at the beginning of next year. We are already planning the event, and yes, see you soon. Bye-bye.